I am here, Left In Podcast, your host Ranger Ludd with Mike Vincenti.
Hello.
Third appearance on the podcast.
It's been three, eh?
Two, but the second one we had some technical difficulties, so it didn't actually get the audio didn't get.
But it happened.
It happened. We had an amazing conversation where we solved all the problems of the world, and you guys didn't get to hear it because the recording device failed, lied to us. We got some great video of us having a conversation that you can't hear, though.
Yeah, that's true. You can see it, you can't hear it, but believe us, it was incredible.
It was the greatest podcast in the world.
It was the greatest words ever spoken.
Isn't there a Jack Black song where he, like the greatest song in the world? Something like it's like he sings about having sung the greatest song in the world when he met the devil.
Oh, that's great. Yes, there is. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good song. Hopefully this one goes without a hitch. But obviously it was human error because I'm using the same device this time.
So we are solving the problems of the world, and we've been discussing inequality in the sense of hierarchies and exploitation, big companies, Harvard Business School, and the way that their model has. Not that we're experts on this, but
yeah, by no means. It's just it piques curiosity. You know, most of these podcasts are really just about what we've been discussing on Facebook, what's popular in conversations. So that had come up in my Facebook feed. You were starting to mention patriarchy, and I was wondering if there was a parallel between business law school and their paradigm of how a business is set up and the general culture of patriarchy. So
right. So part of what we were realizing is kind of underlying a lot of our previous discussions and a lot of the discussions that are happening online is how you communicate. Sometimes is more important than what you communicate.
100%. You know, one of the things I like about this and other podcasts is that this isn't set up as a debate. There's not going to be a winner, you know. It's not, okay, here's a problem, now whoever comes to the best solution wins. I mean, I'm really just, for the most part, thinking out loud. And I need someone to bounce ideas off of. I need them to let me make a mistake. Go ahead, follow that thought through, Mike. Go ahead. Take it there, and now what happens, and now what happens. Sometimes it's fruitful, and sometimes I realize, oh, I made a mistake. You know, I don't want to go there, which quite honestly, is also fruitful because now I know I'm not going to make that mistake twice. But if you're constantly going back, not back and forth, but hitting button heads,
Yep.
you never get there.
Yep.
And so you're going to have the same conversation with someone else who you're going to butt heads with, and you're never going to progress.
Right. It's productive of a sort of screaming kind of slurring each other. I read a thing that basically academia has shifted over the last 30 years from teaching people how to think critically and make reasoned argument with each other towards a shaming culture where you're taught how to basically contemptuously roll your eyes and dismiss somebody with a slur.
Yeah.
Take something out of context and make them, oh, you're a racist, you're a sexist, you are beyond the pale, and nothing you can say now even makes you deserve to be part of the conversation anymore. That's the implicit training that's been going on.
Don't you think it's extremely effective too, though?
It silences a lot of people. I don't know how effective it is. Towards what goal?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Not towards truth, but towards winning.
Right. So there's been a kind of provisional victory that a lot of the university and parts of the culture have lost the battle to this. But it's kind of a pointless victory. I don't know that it was systemic enough for their, like, what did they win? They won control of, there's no conservatives left in universities.
Well, I'm just talking in conversation. You know, whenever you engage, whether, you know, you're at a bar, at a party, online, and you're having a heated discussion, someone wants to win. Nobody wants to lose. And so then that eye rolling, the condescension, you know, that sort of stuff plays very heavily into your performance. So your performance may come out as a winner, even though you haven't really proven anything. You haven't said anything. but man, you performed really well and made the other guy look stupid, so therefore you won.
Mm-hmm.
It just, no commentary on the current system of politics right now, or the current temperature of politics. You would think that they'd be examples, so to speak, to the layman, but
okay. So one of the things they were discussing recently, I saw this in one of the Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson things. So they were talking about like chaos and order.
right,
And Jordan Peterson got slammed in one of his interviews for saying like the chaos is feminine and it's dangerous, and masculine is order. And where did you get off like associating those things? He's like, I didn't make this up. This has been archetypes for 1,000 years.
right,
Or war or whatever. But his point was, I'm not in favor of these archetypes. I'm just describing them and using them to figure things out. And it's that point where chaos meets order where all the interesting things happen. So like if you're doing martial arts or whatever physical skill, you need to get yourself right to the point where chaos and order meet. Order is, I know how to do this. I can do this many reps. I can fight this person safely. I can do this. And then there's this point at which I'm right at the edge of my challenge where it's going to be hard for me, but I can still do it.
Right.
I'm right leaning just beyond my edge. And if I'm beyond my edge, I'm in chaos. Meaning this guy is, that I'm fighting is doing things that I don't know how to respond to. And I'm going to get my ass kicked. I'm going to get hurt. So if you move too far into chaos, you get your ass kicked. But if you're too far in order, you're not learning anything. You're not challenging. You're not growing.
Right.
So it's right at that inflection point. And that's where I think a lot of these discussions happen too. Is like, of course you want to have a discussion where you're pushed to the edge of your understanding. But if it goes beyond that and you're totally out of your depth, you can just be like, tapping out. I don't know anything about this.
Right.
Because if you step into that space, you get hurt. And part of what has happened is like, this battle has meant that it's like you're going to get hurt because just by having a discussion about something we do know a bit about, philosophy or logic or history, where, both of us have a whole bunch of graduate degrees. But if we speak out in the wrong context, it's not that we're right or wrong. We're comfortable with what we could say, but we're not comfortable with the level of chaos it could generate for us socially.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I like talking anyway. I'll get myself in hot water. Silence is always a little bit more uncomfortable. I'd rather be talking nonsense than sit in silence, unless I'm by myself. I won't talk to myself, but I do enjoy conversation. Even, I mean, there was when I went to California on business over the summer. I sat down at the hotel bar and had a drink, and of course everyone there in the hotel bar is sort of on business, downtime. And the guy next to me starts conversation, and he was from one of the middle states, and he was extremely conservative, and I let him talk. I let him know I was on the other side of the spectrum, but I really didn't have too much to offer because. But I let him talk, and the more he talked, the more I tried to distance myself from him, despite the fact that he kept buying me drinks. Because he really did like talking too.
Yeah.
So I know I'm not the only one who likes to talk, but I do like to listen as well. So in these conversations, I already know what I want to say. Unless you're willing to really listen to me without insult me, I'm not going to share. Why? Why would I offer that then? I'd be
that's a funny
falling on a sword.
Insulting specifically. So, I mean, we grew up in the 80s, early 90s, going to high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like insulting was actually a totally standard norm. There was a thing underneath the insulting, which was like a level of comfort and knowing each other and trusting each other and caring about each other's friends, where we did constantly insult the hell out of each other and each other's mothers.
Well, you have to be friends with that person. You have to know your audience. You can't just sit next to a stranger and start talking shit, talking smack to them.
But in a way, like, I remember in like 8th or ninth grade, people insulting me that I didn't know very well, but they were testing me out, you know?
Yeah.
And vice versa. Like, I mean, that was part of what... I'm afraid that that's being lost. That, like, teenagers don't know how to just insult each other and be okay with each other.
Right.
I don't know. But I get the sense that that whole dynamic, because everything could go on social media...
I mean, it depends, you know, if you're already in a conversation where you're trying to get to the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, insulting someone's intelligence is not going to foster any sort of education. It's not going to foster the conversation. Talking smack to the person, you know, if you're both on the same wavelength, yeah, definitely. You know, I mean, I'm in a band, and man, when we're going to the next gig, we rank on each other left and right, and we there's no holds bar. I mean, we are... Singer's Irish, I make fun of him for being Irish. I'm Italian, he makes fun of me for being Italian. And it's hysterical. We laugh. But we're friends. I'm not going to go up to a stranger and start making fun of their heritage.
Yeah. No, and it's almost like you have to do that in order to be in a band together and tour together. You got to just get into it with each other. Otherwise, shit just stores up. You can't be in...
I guess so. I mean,
ongoing relationship with people without having a level of, so to speak, knowing how to fight or blowing off steam or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like part of the way that the public discourse has evolved is that it used to be more space for us to disagree and rank each other out, and like comedians like Robin Williams and stuff, and the stuff he used to, and Eddie Murphy. And just, you know, it was way more kind of like we trusted we felt like we were all on the same side somehow. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but I feel like there was a level of like...
Well, you know, Jerry Seinfeld stopped doing comedy at colleges.
Yeah, I heard that. It's really sad and scary.
And this was back in, you know, I think the late 90s, early 2000s.
It was a while ago.
It was a while ago. And it was because they were too sensitive. He couldn't make any jokes that wouldn't offend somebody. And it was just like, that's a shame.
And he's pretty low
vanilla.
key. Yeah.
He's pretty vanilla.
Like, he never curses. He never, like...
Yeah.
He never really goes off color.
No, exactly.
It's just not his thing.
You know, there are stereotypes, but you know, and it comes around St. Patrick's Day.
Mm.
You know, there's always jokes about Irish and drinking, but are they offended? Are they, you know, do they throw huge hissy fits and be like, you know, let it roll off your back, man, you know?
Well, I think that's a part of what made America great. I'm going to say it.
I'm just going to shut the back door, sorry. But you continue, I'll listen.
Well, each of us as different groups came here, and when we first got to America, we were the discriminated against lowest group. Right?
Yep.
You know, indentured servant, Scotch and Irish, and, you know, they were slaves. Yep. They were white slaves at the beginning, and then, you know, the lowest level of exploited labor, you know, if you're worked to death at 7 years old, I don't know if it really matters that you weren't a slave. Like, the shittiest, worst level of treatment for each new immigrant group that came in, right?
Sure.
Tenements and moving into, like, the worst poverty, and almost everybody was kind of equal in the Depression, except for, like, some subset of the WASPs who were richer, but everybody was, like, at the bottom of the totem pole. Right. So we all kind of equally, like, insulted the hell out of each other. You know, again, I'm not minimizing for a second that, like, black people were always getting the worst of that.
No, I think what you're saying, though, is misery loves company.
Well, I think what I'm saying is we created a space where we all kind of talk crap about each other, but also accept each other. And that became kind of part of, like, you learned how to take a joke and let it roll off your back in order to be in this heterogeneous American society melting pot. And, right. Like, it still makes me a little uncomfortable when people crack jokes about Jews. You know, it still hurts a little bit. But I'd rather not silence them, you know?
And I think you'd rather not break the continuity of this ongoing dynamic between two people, between a group of people. you can always find something to bust ass about,
Yeah.
take offense to. But, everything is so moving and yeah, you don't want to break. You ever see I forget what the movie's called. I think it might be called Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood.
Oh, I heard something. I heard it was really good.
It's an old movie, but it is really good. And I'm not a huge fan of Clint Eastwood.
He's like an old racist dude, right? And he meets like a Hispanic kid or something.
I think he's is he Hispanic? Is he Chinese? It's been so long since I've seen the movie, but it's funny, yes. And the very question is the whole point of it. You called him an old racist dude, and was he racist? He said racist things, but again, it was making fun of. I mean, at the end, he basically... Well, I don't want to ruin the movie if you haven't seen it, because it's definitely well worth it, but... even in that movie, he was a stand-up guy, did the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to question if he was racist, because racists really don't think that much of other people in general. So what he did, in the end, was completely selfless.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point he actually draws upon. The very thing we're talking about right now. He talks about, calling people, slurs and stuff, and it's all the things you were taught not to do.
Mm-hmm.
But among friends, even among strangers, if you just want to get along, you let that stuff roll off your back.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, what do you think you're doing? Changing the world? Are we all taking a vote? It's like, no, we're all in the trenches together.
Well, it's like there's a leap of judgment, and like there's a spectrum from people who are, normal people, or even good people, or let's just say normal people, but they have a tendency to say things that are not always, this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
But just because you said something doesn't mean you're a capital R racist who's signing up to join the KKK or a lynch mob or would agree with hurting people because of their race. You might hold some prejudices and talk some shit.
Right.
I feel like we need some really big different categories between people who are nice people and never say anything that offensive, but default, if you push them on it, they kind of think that this and that. But it doesn't mean that they're like capital R racists who are signing up with the KKK.
Yeah.
And then there's the people who even talk a bunch of crap, and like you said, like a guy sitting at the bar, voicing a lot of pretty loud opinions about the immigrants coming in or whatever.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that this is a guy who's ready to go down there to the border and start shooting. And then there's the people who actually want to implement some sort of, crazy right, not right wing, but racist conspiracy or whatever.
Well, I mean...
We need different categories. You need to have it be that if you say one thing wrong, you're not immediately grouped with the KKK.
Yeah. I mean, and then the contrary to that, for instance, just today, in the news today, George Bush is dead at, 94?
Allah Shalom, yes.
God rest his soul.
God bless his soul.
So on Facebook, there's, most people saying kind things. The guy's just deceased.
Yep.
Then, of course, there's this one person who says, nice to whitewash this, but he was a piece of shit.
Right, he didn't care enough about AIDS.
I'm like...
Whatever, yeah.
First of all, timing is really inappropriate. The guy just died. Just out of a little respect for his family and, your own honor, keep that to yourself. Let people mourn the way they want to mourn. But boy, it's like, no, immediately you jump to he was a piece of shit. Really? Was he really? I mean, I would need you to back that up. I mean, it's just a very serious accusation.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it was disheartening. It really was. So, I don't know.
I mean, look, some people, like my friend who posted that thing, he's been pretty radical a long time. I wasn't surprised that he would say it. The thing about George Bush being, we shouldn't whitewash it, and I mean, a lot of people posted it, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, this is one of my friends, huh?
Yeah, so he posted something about when there were all the AIDS epidemic, the people from they're dumping ashes on the White House lawn of people who had died of AIDS during the Bush presidency, and he didn't do enough in time or whatever.
He didn't acknowledge it or whatever.
Yeah, and it might be true. I don't remember. I certainly know that in general the AIDS epidemic didn't get dealt with well enough by the whole system, the medical system, the government, whatever, for a while.
But is that how you're going to define the person?
Right. I mean, I could say,
You're going to take that one element. You look at his entire life. Did you know that he was the youngest pilot in the Navy?
In World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a hero. He was a war hero. I mean,
but let's ignore that and let's focus on this one thing. This one issue that I hold dear. Because all the other issues, everything else, I don't know. It was just very inappropriate. God help them when they die. And I have to comment.
I mean, I think there is a difference between public figures and just people. Like,
just absolutely, yeah.
What you're saying about a public person in public, it's not to their family, it's not about their family and their loved ones and their friends, They have their own thing. They're probably not paying attention to Facebook when they go to their friend's funeral. You know what I mean? Like, it's...
I know what you're saying, but again, I mean, and then you blame them for thinking that they're different. Well, if you treat them different and you give them different rules, well, I don't have to treat you the same as I would my own friend because you're a celebrity, you're famous, you're in the media. Now there's a double standard.
Yep.
And that's on me. I'm creating that double standard, not them.
Yep.
So they just reinforce that double standard when they then speak and promote their opinion and, try to cause some sort of political awareness of something. Who are they to say something? Well, who are they? The same person that you're calling a piece of shit. You would not do that to any other person, really. Face to face. Because it's just a mean thing, It's just, why would you do that?
Well, I think you just hit the biggest part of it, is like, and this I will echo Joe Rogan was saying, like, if you met somebody in person, you just wouldn't say certain things to them that you would say online.
That's for sure.
I don't even use Twitter. I don't know if you do.
No.
So, but I hear that Twitter is even worse than Facebook. Facebook, there's some degree of like, we're friends, we know each other, whoever that is, or it's a friend of a friend, but there's, in my experience, there's a degree of civility or trying to like, you might say something nasty about somebody, you might get into it for a little bit, but, if it's somebody that I was friends with, I might send them a separate, private message being like, whoa, we got pretty angry at each other. Like, I'm your friend, dude. I care about you. Like,
right.
But in Twitter, I gather that it's like there isn't even that, and so people just the worst part of your instant impulse to say the harshest thing, comes out, but there's no moderation of it. There's no desire to direct message the person after and say, hey, we're still friends, dude, because we're not friends. We're Twitter followers of each other. I don't know. I don't use Twitter, but this is what I hear happens.
Adults. Think of the kids. 13, 14 years old doing this. Right. Playing that same game. And kids are awful. They're mean.
And girls worse.
That's what, yeah, especially.
Have you seen any of Jonathan Haidt? H-A-I-D-T?
I've read his book.
The Coddling of the American Mind?
No. The Righteous Mind.
Yeah. He's a great scholar.
He's really good. Him. Yeah. Again, he's a evolutionary psychologist.
Something like that. Because he said something that 1995 is the cutoff. This is what he's been talking about a lot in public appearances recently. Kids who were born in 1995. So there somehow was a tipping point in the technology or how they grew up or whatever, that by the time they got to whatever it was, junior high school, they all were on smartphones and had social media, by, I think that's 2007 or 8 or whatever. Kids who grew up before then have some memory of interacting face-to-face where social media really wasn't that important. But the kids who grew up and then went to college starting in 2000, maybe it's 12, I don't know, he has like a whole thing about it, but there's a massive shift in the amount of mental illness and suicide and stuff like that. There's always been bullies. I mean, you and I grew up with bullies.
Yeah.
But I don't remember much Um,
Well, I'll say this much, and this is coming from a boy,
yeah.
because I think girls have a completely different experience. As a boy, the only way I was threatened was physically.
Yes.
That's the only way I was threatened. And maybe even often, but that's the only threat there was. You could say whatever you wanted to me, it did not bother me. But boys were not that mean. Not like
Yes.
girls.
Yes. I mean,
Girls are emotionally tortured by other girls to a level that is just beyond. I mean,
way beyond.
When I hear what they're saying at such a young age, I'm like, when I was your age, I didn't even know what you were talking about.
Yeah.
You know, now I'm 44, I understand what you're saying, and it's the most awful thing I could think of saying to someone.
And not just mean, like, in the sense of saying terrible things about somebody, but even just to exclude them. Like, these sort of, like, oh, you're in-group, out-group matters more to girls, I think.
Yeah.
Because boys, I mean, there was a period where I got picked on in the neighborhood, and I got beat up a little bit by some older kids, and, you know, I got into some fight, but I kept going out to play, and, like,
Right.
got my ass kicked for, like, a couple months, and then I was no longer the target, and it was over.
Right.
And it was like, okay, you know, like, it sucked at the time, but it wasn't like, I don't know. I could imagine, like, I remember a kid in 5th grade who just, he didn't know how to respond to it, so he kept being vulnerable, and I'm sure it was hell for him for a while. But still, like, as a boy, it's different than as a girl, because I think you have a different level of, well, this is what these new things are saying, is that, like, girls growing up in the age of social media, it used to be, according to Jonathan Haidt, okay, you know, whether you're a boy or girl, you go out amongst the kids, you're getting socialized, you get teased, you get beat up. If you're a girl, you get, you know, mean things said about you. But you go home and you're in your home environment. You're separate from it. But now that they've got the smartphones and the social media,
it's never ending.
It's never ending. And if they become the target all day, all night, people talking shit about them, and just that same sort of instinctive hazing thing that probably is a normal, healthy thing in a perfect world of the actual, I don't know, ideal template of how humans should be living and raised. I'm sure all of these things have a natural channel.
Yeah.
You know, if we were healthy, I don't know what that would look like. But with social media, it is just destructive. And so suicide rates among girls has, like, skyrocketed. Like, it's the highest. It's so high that our life expectancy has gone down for the first time since World War I, 100 years ago.
And it's due to suicide.
It's due to suicide and opioids. Like, suicide is the kids, you know, and then the opioids is anyone.
Really, you could make the argument that opioid addiction is just another form of suicide, just, you know, slow.
You can definitely make that case. I don't know how long it takes. I don't know. I've never really done.
I mean,
I think opioids is like overdoses. It could happen at any time, right? If you take the wrong batch.
No, it's not necessarily the wrong batch. It's just you know, it's a typical overdose. You just do too much, and, you know, it's never enough. So you're constantly skating that line. Like,
Right.
I knew someone, and, you know, his last texts were to his girlfriend at the time. You know, they planned to do this, and he says, I want to go get high, but I need you to sit there in the car with me to make sure I don't fall asleep. Because apparently once you fall asleep,
you might not wake up.
You may not wake up.
Yeah.
So you needed that other person there. Well...
You're talking about Joe? You all the way back to that?
No, it's
more recent.
Someone else, yeah, very recent. And, yeah, it's just to get stuck on the opioids is, you know... Look, I'm the last person to demonize drugs or anyone's personal choice. But I've seen very little reward for doing heroin or any opioid.
I'm not sure we would know. Meaning, like, I'm sure it helps.
Personally, I've never done it, so I don't know. But, like anything, there's good things and bad.
Well, legally. I mean, like, I had, you know, they gave me a prescription for 3 Percocets or something, or 5, after I had a minor surgery, and, you know, it made me nauseous, but the pain, you know, in the immediate day or two after a surgery is really intense. It's more intense than your normal experience, and it wasn't.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
you're
it
taking
helped a
it
little bit. It took the edge. I took it on prescription
for a
you know.
purpose.
But
when you're doing it recreationally, it's a different thing, no?
But that's what I'm saying is I think it's a sliding. Like the vast majority of people who become addicted to opioids started on prescription.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
So it was medicating. I guess back pain is the single leading thing, or whatever kind of pain or problem, and then they wind. You know, neither one of us are experts on this, so you know, disclosure that I don't know exactly, but it seems like there's a big correlation between all these levels of kind of social vulnerability and then vulnerability to really strong addicted like opioid addiction.
I mean, it's a leap. It's a hypothesis. I'm curious to see, a study done if there is. But I think opioid addiction is a very easy one to slide into. Very easy. Anybody can become addicted to opioids. I think people at large would have a tougher time becoming addicted to. I don't know. I'm trying to think of another addictive drug.
Right, cocaine or heroin.
Marijuana.
Or,
is marijuana even
marijuana?
addictive?
I don't think it's as addictive, or nor near as.
I'm just wondering if it's addictive at all.
I don't think we know that. I mean, I gather that enough evidence that it isn't.
Cocaine's a good one though, because cocaine is definitely addictive.
Yeah.
Everyone likes the feeling when they're on cocaine. It's why it's so popular. But it definitely has a different. Now, it's not like I don't know anyone who died of overdoses on cocaine. I'm not saying that's an angel drug. But there's a reason why opioids specifically are so.
They're really strong.
Damaging.
They're strong.
Very damaging. And again, technology advances have good and bad things, and now we have this thing called fentanyl, which is 100 times stronger than heroin.
Yeah,
and
I've heard that.
And that's how people are dying, because they're mixing fentanyl with heroin. You think you're just getting heroin, but you're getting fentanyl. Some people don't even care. They'll just take less fentanyl, and
right. I heard that, and this baffles me a little bit. They start out with like a legal prescription for whatever, OxyContin or Percocet or something, and then their prescription plan makes it more expensive for them to stay on the prescription drug than to get street. Street drugs are cheaper, which is the reverse of what I would have thought. So they're doing the street drugs because it's cheaper than paying a couple $100 out of pocket for your prescription drugs, and then you wind up getting whatever the fuck you get on the street, and you could die.
Exactly. I mean, look, the American pharmaceutical industry is about the most corrupt it could be. I mean, now there's finally legal issues that manufacturers have to deal
sued,
with.
Yeah.
Which is, they have millions of deaths on their hand. They're the ones who are creating the bills to sell the drugs, to sell to insurance companies. They're also in the pockets of the insurance companies themselves. It's really a corrupt system. If you put that business model on any other industry, you'd be like, are you fucking kidding me? It's finally coming to light, but I don't think anyone's really.
According to Michael Pollan, the food industry is a little similar.
Yeah.
That when you eat foods made by corporations are different than foods made by people, I think is his quote. That when a company makes food, makes, processed, packaged, fast food or whatever, they use way more salt, fat, and sugar with the explicit goal of creating what they call craveability, which is just shorthand for addiction.
Right.
And, if there's an industry that rivals the pharmaceutical industry for its body count, it's
absolutely 100%.
It's the food industry for making all these people die of diabetes and obesity.
100%. Yep. I mean, likewise, look at the sugar industry. The sugar industry demonized fat in meats because they said that fat was the reason for obesity.
Right.
Well, modern science now tells you just the opposite.
It's not true.
It's sugar.
Yeah.
And look at our diet. Everything has sugar in here. I'll do it. It's really sugar to blame. It's crazy. I mean,
But I'm still not sure, like, with opioid. Well, with any of the addictions. One of my friends is a doctor who's an addiction specialist. And he said that if you line up 100 people and you give them all the drugs, only whatever it is, 6 or 7 or 8 of them will wind up becoming addicted to each of the drugs.
Really?
The other 92, and we've done this experiment on a large scale because most of us at this point in America, probably more than 100 million, I don't know how many Americans, have been through at least one context where they got prescribed opioids. I was, on more than one occasion. Did tiny prescriptions. I happen to be in the subset of those 100 people who actually, it made me nauseous. I don't want that. I'd rather see if,
You'd rather withstand the pain than suffer the...
Yeah, I mean, I'll take an Advil or something that's it's just a lot milder. But it makes me nauseous. I can't imagine how it could be pleasurable. It made me nauseous. Nauseous is worse than pain in a way. You know, it's like more uncomfortable in my body. And in some other people too. But apparently 8 out of those 100 people will be like, more. Give me that. Because I feel awful otherwise. Like, wow. Like, it doesn't just answer the pain. It, like, makes my psychic pain of getting through every day as a human go away. Or what? I don't even know. Whatever. There's physical and psychological addiction components. And I don't know the difference. Or I don't know how it plays out. But basically, we've done this experiment where we gave opioids to so many people that we found all the ones who are going to be addicted.
Okay. I do think it's easy to get addicted, though. I don't know how to really run an experiment at the detriment of...
You mean besides what we've already done?
I mean, because to be honest, I don't know. I mean, you really have to have a purpose in life. If your purpose in life is just feeling good, you will be addicted.
You'll find something.
Yeah, the issue is not really the drug. The issue is you have nothing else to live for. Mm-hmm. You have nothing else going for you, or your life is so bad. You are so stressed out. You know, something else is wrong, that the drugs are just easing your pain. They're doing their job. Because even with, well, okay, full disclosure, with pot, you know, back in the 90s and stuff, I was a pothead, man. There wasn't, I don't think, a sober moment for a good 10 years. I was constantly smoking. Couldn't imagine without it. But then all of a sudden, life got a little bit more serious, and in a good way.
Okay.
I wanted to be more on the ball because I was interacting with other people and not in, you know, the relaxed, hey man, what's going on? You know, I needed to perform, you know. And so the motivation for me was not to be high, but to be sharp. And the two, you know, rarely are at the same time.
Okay.
You know. So for me it was an easy transition. It wasn't like, okay, I'm just going to quit smoking pot. And I'm going to do a cold turkey and I'm going to try as hard as I can. It just was a natural progression because my life changed.
But were you... I'm not sure...
And again, I'm talking marijuana.
Well, I'm saying, like, I don't
big
know...
difference between opioids. With opioids...
Right, I don't know if you were addicted in that same sense.
Yeah, you know, you're right. I definitely wasn't. Yeah.
Not by that standard.
Not by that standard, yeah, no. It's apples and oranges, and... Because I do know someone who did get first, you know, he was on regular pills, but pills would cost him like $100 a day. And just before he moved on to, you know, that was the clue. But he would wake up and suddenly, you know, he'd be like, just to get normal, just to feel normal, I need to do a pill or two. And this is, you know, regular prescribed drugs, whatever. And he knew he was addicted. But the terror, the horrible feeling he would feel if he didn't take those pills drove him to considering, well, let me just go to heroin. It's cheaper, it's easier, it's quicker, you know. So there's definitely something to it.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I have a fear that despair is spreading in America, regardless of any drugs or anything. I mean, it's almost like the drugs might be a symptom. But but the purpose, I think you just pulled on a really big
Thread.
yeah, you popped a cork on something, because like over the last 2 years, and now there's a chance of my company getting rebooted. I would have turned that down a year ago. I was too burned out. I didn't even want to think about it.
Right.
I was really burned out on my startup, but it brought me to a point where, in some ways, I didn't feel like I had a clear purpose in life. Everything I had done up until then, I was, doing different kinds of activism or teaching or learning or grad school or religious seminary or whatever. Like, it never, at some level, I never questioned that I was either had a meaning and a purpose, or I was trying to discover, and I had this intrinsic motivation to keep discovering, which I think you had when you were, even all those 10 years, you were in school and you were learning philosophy, and then you wound up getting a grad degree, and it was going to be a PhD, and you wanted to keep learning more. There was a purpose pulling you forward.
Sure.
So there was a period over the last couple of years where that fell into question. It was like, oh, I had failed, my business had failed, and I was like, I don't know what I'm living for except to feel better. And I skated close enough to that to have, what is that difference between sympathy and empathy? Like, you could sympathize for somebody, oh, they're having struggle.
You can't really feel
empathy. Yeah, I could feel more like if there was a drug that legit made me feel better, I might just keep taking it because I was feeling awful.
Right.
And I was in Colombia where cocaine is legal or decriminalized or something, and it's $4 a gram, which is like, it's literally cheaper than coffee. Coffee's a drug too, but whatever. But like, it didn't, it's fun, but it didn't make me feel good enough to be, like, I started taking salsa dance lessons, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do coke because then I have a little less energy for a salsa lesson. Like, it wasn't even a big calculation, which is kind of ridiculous. But maybe I'm just sort of dodging this, like, oh, I didn't get addicted. But I could, if I was really miserable, I could see that being like...
You know how they say addiction, or some say addiction is a disease, and others are adamantly against it. And they say no because that disavows a person of responsibility.
Yeah, you're not holding them accountable.
I wonder. I really don't have opinion on the matter because...
right, or it's the wrong question or something.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure what
good
purpose
it
serves.
What purpose does it serve to say that they are? Okay. It doesn't mean they're in any more control of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, once they've gone past whatever threshold of, like, they can't get out of it on their own.
Yeah, and that's why psychology is so fascinating to me, because apparently there are definitely patterns. You can definitely learn something and tell... you can predict a person's actions based on their history and their emotional well-being and whatnot. If not, psychologists wouldn't have a job. Psychiatry now, add drugs into the mix. Yeah, it's
There's something unexamined there that scares me. Like, I heard psychiatry described as our priesthood. Because in a way they actually have more power than cops.
Yeah.
Because a cop could mess you up, whatever way. But they don't...
Well, I mean, perfect example. Look at Charles Manson.
What do you mean?
Did he commit a single murder?
Oh, he just told other people to.
Yeah.
Or suggested it or whatever.
He was basically their psychiatrist. Psychologist. He didn't even use drugs. I mean, I think there
Right.
may have been drugs involved.
Right.
But he wasn't prescribing drugs and under the guise of drugs, because you're now high, you're going to go do this. No. He was able to convince them. He got in their minds. He was playing the role of psychologist to these people.
I was going in the other direction that, like, we have all sorts of discussions in our society about politics or whatever, and you can have a whole wide range of opinions. But it's way more disempowering to say somebody's crazy than to say that they're wrong. If you say that they're crazy, they can be institutionalized. Oh, that's why I was going in the direction of cops. If you commit a crime, you can be locked up for a set amount of time.
Right.
You committed a crime, and there's a period. There's a finite number, even if it's a life sentence. But it's like, you committed a crime, you're not crazy. But if you're crazy, you could be committed, and you have no power to get yourself out. It's indefinite. You're outside of our consensus reality. So in a way, the priests have more power to just say, you're out.
Yeah.
Right? That's like more powerful and kind of freaky. Because we've discovered that psychiatrists and some other diagnoses and stuff are kind of wrong. Like, it's a lot fuzzier than other kinds of medicine.
Medicine, sure. Yeah.
Huh.
I wish I had studied a bit more psychology in college. You know, it's interesting because psychology only came about in the late 1800s, really.
Yeah.
Mid to late 1800s. Before that, it was all philosophy. But when you started to focus on the minds, the actions of people, you know, so psychology is still sort of in its infancy when it comes to practices. I mean, look at mathematics. How long has mathematics been around? We've pretty much nailed mathematics. And when I say we've nailed it, I just mean we've gotten really good at it.
Yeah.
But we're talking thousands of years. Psychology, on the other hand...
Or mostly built on itself, with agreed on central ideas and axioms and proofs.
Yeah. Psychology has to go through the same thing. The study of psychology, the school.
Well, I've heard that...
Because look, you know, even Freud...
Yeah.
Is in the postmodern narrative, Freud is really looked down upon.
Right.
He's not respected. Now, sure, he had some crazy ideas, whatever.
But his
really,
insight was very important, yeah.
Yeah, what he did, he started it all.
In a way, yeah. I mean, that's, I'm kind of curious to see how it plays out.
I mean,
because,
did he have any contemporaries? Excuse me, I'm just going to put some more wood on the fire.
Well, I think there was a couple, but by far the biggest is Jung.
But he even came later, no?
Not so much later. I think he was a student.
Okay.
I think Jung and Adler were like the biggest students. And part of what's been striking for me over the last few years is discovering like there's whole new schools of psychiatry, or psychology, I should say, that have become very strong or considered very effective, like that only were, you know, quote, invented in like, I don't know, the 80s or 90s or whatever. Like cognitive behavioral therapy is like
Right.
very clearly extremely effective for certain kinds of people, certain kinds of things, and it's Jonathan Haidt talks about that.
I mean, and then there's also neurology.
Right, now we actually know how the brain works. Ish, a little bit.
Yeah, and it's not always, you know, it's not clear what is the effective method of curing someone. Is it a neurological thing? Is it a psychological thing? It's, you know, like anything, it's brought up more questions than answers in a respect. You know, and I'm not saying there's one answer. It could be a combination of things, but...
Well, one of the things that we're starting to discover is across cultures, like, psychology doesn't work the same.
Oh, that's interesting.
Apparently, schizophrenia and, what's the other one? Parkinson's.
Parkinson's?
Schizophrenia and Parkinson's are the same across all cultures, I think. And maybe there's one other thing. But all the other things that we call, you know, neurotic, depression, PTSD, whatever, are not seen the same or stigmatized the same or even diagnosed the same in other cultures. So that's part of what and then treated the same. Like, you know, it's a bit of a sort of a cliched description, but in somewhere in Africa, you know, their diagnostic question for you about things like depression is like, so when did you stop dancing? And this is where kind of like, I mean, on a certain level, none of this is new. Like witch doctors and shamans and whatever have been doing this for thousands of years. Like if you're miserable, you go to the guy, or you go to the the wise woman, and she tells you, do this, do that, or eat this, or go have a ceremony and pray.
Right.
And we had other outlets to treat this. Now that's why I was also saying it's become our priesthood. Is that you used to go to your priest, to your rabbi, to be like,
right.
Hello, Father, I'm freaking miserable.
Right.
And he would say, go do 10 Hail Marys, and, well, I don't know. Like, the cool thing that I heard about, I think it was a couple of the East African cultures, was that they treat it as if it's like a bad spirit in you.
Something to get over.
Got into you. It's because it's not you.
Oh, I see.
And it's less stigmatizing. Like when you get over it, in a West in America, you have a depression or whatever. It's kind of like everyone like treats you with kid gloves, or they're all weirded out.
It becomes your identity.
Becomes your identity, and then like even if you're better afterwards, people are like, "Oh,
how you doing?
How you doing?" But in their culture, it was kind of like, "Oh, the spirit's gone. How you doing? Like you're back."
Right.
Like it was never you.
Huh.
It was this bad spirit that possessed you. There's something about that actually makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I don't think I've really wrestled with depression all that significantly.
Or temporary insanity. Or a bad trip.
I mean, but that I know ends,
Yeah.
really in just a few hours. If, God willing.
Well, that's what made me think of a possession. Is that I think it actually makes a lot of sense to think of it that way.
Right.
You're sort of possessed. I think Nietzsche said, or somebody said, that like individuals are actually less likely to go crazy than groups. That groups can be possessed really easily.
Wow.
By craziness.
That's scary. Huh. I mean, truth be told, I think psychedelics and the experience of a trip has somewhat protected me against insanity.
Okay.
Because I feel I've been there and back. So if it does happen, I mean...
You've been to insanity, or you've been to like higher truth? Or both?
Well, I guess one leads to the other. I've been to insanity.
Okay.
But I also knew I ingested something, so
right.
It will eventually end.
Right.
If all of a sudden I started feeling like I was in Alice in Wonderland,
yep.
and I didn't take any mushrooms, that might freak me out a little bit.
Yep.
But nonetheless, I know it's go time. It's like, you don't have a choice. And that just like if you're suffering from a bad trip, you can't go down that rabbit hole and just get worse and worse and worse.
Okay.
It's go time. Pull yourself together, make the best of a bad situation, and do all the tricks that you know to get yourself out of that tailspin. Go to a different room. Put a different song on. Take a walk outside. It's not that bad. There are things you can do to make your situation better because there were things that were done that made your situation that bad.
Okay.
That lesson in life, I don't apply it just to when I'm tripping. Yeah, that's throughout the whole thing. I've walked into job situations where this entire company's data is on the line. They're freaking out. I got these people over here thinking they don't have a job tomorrow because the whole company is under. I got the person in the corner office over there wondering if his company's going under and, whatnot because all their data... That's a lot of pressure.
Is your clients, you mean?
Yeah. That's a lot of pressure. You know what? It's go time. Put the emotion aside, focus, and do what you can. Sometimes the outcome is good, sometimes the outcome's not so good, but it's it's really not the outcome. It's specifically it's how you handle the outcome, how you handle the whole situation. You're right. You just lost your job. You know what? Here's the opportunity to find the job that you really want.
Right.
You know, it's go time. You gotta make the best of a bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
So insanity, if you ever find yourself in that predicament, man, I hope you have the mental tools to get you through, because you could be absolutely torturous to where society, the priest, or whoever needs you medicated. You cannot be violent to others. You can't be violent to yourself, because now you're just baggage to us. We're just gonna medicate the shit out of you until you eventually die. That's not the life anyone wants to lead. So I really hope you've garnered the mental stability and wisdom.
So there's a lot there. I mean, I think you're right about a lot of it, but it's also very situational. Like for you and me giving
100%.
advice to somebody,
100%.
it makes sense to say, okay, you're in a situation, get yourself together, make the best of it. Even if it's a totally unfair, you're brutal, wrong situation. Okay, now what do? You're getting unjustly arrested, or you're escaping from, a drug gang in Honduras and you're trying to make your way to
I was just going to say,
place.
I mean, it's everything that you have control over.
Right.
If you don't have control over, the drug gangs in your neighborhood, there's only so much you can do to be happy. And, when I say it's go time, it's like, yeah, move to a different neighborhood, move to a different country, do something. You gotta, this is your life.
Yeah.
It's go time. But if you do the opposite and always play the victim,
right,
at every corner you're playing the victim, you're gonna have a real bad trip. You're gonna have a real bad trip.
So reading this book by Bell Hooks, called The Will to Change, and she's talking about growing up in patriarchy, meaning growing up in the 50s when it was much more, men get to do this, women get to do this, like Mad Men.
Yeah.
Sexual harassment was normal, women weren't taken seriously, all these things. And, I didn't grow up exactly like that. But parts of it I could certainly relate to. But one of the things that I've heard from them, I don't think it's as true anymore, but in the 50s, the Soviets had their gulags, right? If you question things politically in the Soviet Union, they would throw you into this jail, prison, just re-education system. I don't think it was as massacre prone as it was in the 30s. They killed a lot of people. By the 50s, 60s, they didn't really kill people. They just sent them into the gulags. It wasn't pretty, but it wasn't massacres. They were like, oh, you're crazy because you're questioning communism, you're questioning...
China's doing that now, right?
China's always had a piece of it. But the number of people that China incarcerates is actually still less than America.
Jesus Christ.
Well, but so that's what was interesting, is that forgetting about prisons for a second, in the 50s and 60s, it was really common for women to have nervous breakdowns and get institutionalized.
Really?
Yeah. They would say, oh, you're crazy, and they'd give you pills, and they'd send you away to a mental institution. One of the things that I read claimed that the numbers of women who were incarcerated in America was like higher than in the Soviet Union.
Wow.
That it was like, really, because most of those women weren't crazy. They were just like freaking out against, or pushing back, maybe even totally reasonably, against the world the way it was then. They were like, hey, why shouldn't I have an opinion that's equal to you? And they were like, you're crazy. We're going to send you to an institution and, give you all these drugs. What do you mean you think you shouldn't have to be beaten? It was much worse. I don't know how bad it is now by comparison. I'm sure it's gotten better.
I'd like Peterson's answer to that.
Yeah, I disagree with him on this end of things. I mean, I agree with him that things have gotten drastically better since the 50s. I disagree with him about how bad things were in the 50s. But I don't think that it means there was a global, capital letter, single entity patriarchy around the entire world. Each culture had its own sexist bullshit that played out and still plays out in different ways. It doesn't mean there's the patriarchy. Like, when I was in Israel, I met the fourth wife, who was like 17, on her third kid, and she's the fourth wife of a Bedouin sheikh who's 54 years old.
She was 17 and she was the fourth wife.
Or maybe now she's 21. She married when she was 17.
Jesus Christ.
Arranged marriage when she was, 15 or something. And the fourth, it's like, that's a patriarchy. Like, she can't go anywhere without being accompanied by a male relative. She had no choice over who she married. I don't know if their sexual relations were really more like rape. I don't know.
Right.
But that's a capital P. She's the property of her husband.
Right.
Like, that's a patriarchy with a capital P. A patriarchy, that culture. It does not mean that there's the patriarchy, all of the cultures together. We don't all cooperate in the same exact way.
Right.
We definitely need different words for those things. But I don't dispute that in the 50s in America, the way women were treated was not a whole lot better than those Bedouin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm scared to argue on behalf of Peterson.
Right, no, I mean, he's right about some things, but he's not right about everything, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he's right that things have gotten better since then.
I mean,
The
whole thing is about education. When you learn that, your station in life does not necessarily have to stay the same. That you are a free agent.
Yeah.
Despite the social restraints on you. That's freedom. And I think that, was being realized in the 50s, and it wasn't until the 60s that
got acted on.
That got acted on, right.
Right, that black people got the vote and women got more rights and a lot of minorities.
Just in general respect all around,
Yeah.
Still to this day, I know a few men who respect women less than men,
Sure.
So, that there is, a problem. But is it...
Is it systemic? I mean...
It is systemic in a regard. I'm not going to deny that. It definitely is. I mean, women are still paid less by the dollar than their male counterparts. However, you could make the argument that there is a reason for that. Women are burdened with the responsibility of childbirth.
Yep.
You're going to be missing from the company for 9 months. So especially now, the average person holds a job for, 5-6 years and then moves on to the next job. If they have one kid, the company automatically assumes that not only are they going to be missing for 1 year, but now it's also assumed that they pay for 3 to 6 months of, what do you call that, a child...
Well, it's also because America's stupid and puts the burden on the companies for that. But,
I'm just saying that is it's a rationale for it. I'm not trying to say it's the right way to do things, but it's the rationale.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the gender pay gap disappears when you factor in how many hours you work, whether you're taking higher risk jobs, which fields you chose to go into.
Yeah.
A bunch of those differences do disappear. I don't think there's zero pay gap, but I think in a lot of companies in a lot of the West, if you're doing the same job at the same stage of career, working the same hours, man and woman, you're probably getting paid the same. But, if you are in a position, like you said, because of either childbirth or whatever, and maybe you're discouraged from going after leadership positions, and there's still a bit of a glass ceiling towards leadership positions. And there's a lot of reasons that it's definitely not gone, but I also don't think that it's this global patriarchy problem anymore in the West.
It's not a conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy, and it's also not... It wasn't a conspiracy in the 50s either.
Yeah, true.
But it was I mean, there was a level of just colossal, all the way until the maybe 80s, maybe parts of it until recently that.
Well, yeah, that's what the whole Me Too movement's
That's what the
about.
whole Me Too, and that's totally legit. That women were, expected in certain contexts to give up sexual favors just to get in or get advancement. Like, that's horrible.
It's horrible, but it's never going to go away.
No, probably not.
I mean,
Well,
to be fair,
this comes back to
women
power.
will use that power to their advantage too. It may not be for a corporate job because that would be inappropriate, but you're going to be charming as much as you can, men and women. It doesn't have to necessarily lead to sex, but when you're trying to be charming, a little flirtation here and there, you're trying to get something.
Manipulation, you're saying?
It's all manipulation, and that's what I really don't like about the business world is it's all manipulative.
Yeah, this
It's
actually comes back to
manipulation.
where we started. Like, I'm not sure that hierarchies belong in the context that we have them.
I'm sorry, say again?
Hierarchies, power.
Right. You're not sure what?
They belong in the contexts that we have them.
Oh.
Like, there should be a hierarchy for, like, who's the best, musicians to join your band. If one of your band members leaves, you want someone who's a really good musician to take their place. You don't want just some schmo who just says, well, I'm the next up, because I'm a trans woman from the Philippines, like whatever.
Right.
That's
Right.
not a reason to hire
Right.
a bassist.
Right.
You need a bassist who can play your music well and is
Right.
going to make your band awesome. There's a natural hierarchy that should be there. Of like, how good are you at being, you don't want like neuroscience to be equal opportunity. Like if your brain is getting operated on,
Right.
you don't want anyone to just say, I want to try that. Like, of course there should be some hierarchies of competence. That is something I totally agree with Jordan Peterson on. But then like hierarchies of just control over resources, over levels of business.
I guess what we're doing is we're really, with the scalpel, separating
making distinctions.
aristocracy from hierarchy.
Yep.
I think we're all in agreement that aristocracy is wrong. We don't want that. I mean, hell, we're Americans. The last thing we want is aristocracy.
Feudalism.
Feudalism, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want that. But we do want the best.
That's a really good way
Now,
to pull it together.
This is what I don't like about the current situation in America. And I can only speak about America because I've only lived here all my life. But it seems like the aristocracy in America are using their resources to not only firm up their aristocracy. Look at education. You can't climb that corporate ladder without an education. So the aristocracy that has wealth and power has no problem with a higher education being really expensive. That's their investment in their family's future.
Right, it puts you into indenture. Unless you're super rich,
Right.
getting a basic education now that you need to enter with a chance of true advancement is
Exactly.
gonna put you in indentured servitude for like all your 20s and 30s.
Exactly.
You can't take entrepreneurial risks at 24 because you're in $100,000 of student debt or $200,000.
You can't even buy a house. You can't even really significantly contribute to society aside from paying the taxes on a job that you've taken so that you can pay your student loans off.
Yep.
You tell me that my student loans are at a low interest? Oh, fuck, man. We're talking $50, $60, $70, $80,000.
Yep, and it's just sitting there. Yeah. And it's I mean
this is what Bernie talks about when he talks about democracy and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And this opportunity. We're not looking for equal outcome. We're looking for equal opportunity. Well, how do you get that when the aristocracy makes the opportunity $1? You got to cash in.
Mm-hmm.
That's wrong.
You got to pay to play. You mean?
You got to pay to play. Exactly. That's exactly what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's worse too because to get even like in like vocational degrees like.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up next. Yeah.
Like let's just say one example I heard is like pharmacists, right? Like, okay, you're a pharmacist. It's like a pretty straightforward job. I don't think it's even a 4-year degree. Maybe it's like a 3-year degree or something, or a 1-year master's or something. And then you can just work as a pharmacist and make a pretty solid salary. But like this new set of changes in the pharmaceutical industry and whatever, and then they paid for like, oh, you need to have a new set of trainings because there's a different way we do things. And so then they're like, we're writing legislation that everyone now has to get this additional certification.
Yeah. And
you have to pay for it. And that means you wind up like taking out a loan, going to school at night, just to keep your job, basically. It's basic, and so that basically means they legislated that part of pharmacists' future earnings go to the financial industry. The financial industry is the thing that really bothers me as part of this new aristocracy. Is like, I'm not saying there needs to be no financial industry whatsoever, but so much of the financial industry is a way of sucking the money from all the other parts of the economy.
Yep.
Worse than even the government, I think, because the government, like, at least we know what taxes are. You can...
this is what makes me the classical liberal. The government is us.
Yeah.
We don't want something, we vote it out. It's that simple. But the fact that we keep voting the same people in, well, why are we so surprised? The fact that 90% of people don't vote in regular local elections, you know what? To each of you, go fuck yourselves because you're not involved. This is a democracy. This isn't China. This isn't Russia where you don't have a say. You do have a say, you just choose not to say anything.
I'm not sure America is a functional democracy anymore. But I know what you're saying.
I'll agree. The point I am trying to make, which I'm sure you're saying, local definitely. But even in presidential, what was the turnout? 40%?
No, 60.
60% something, yeah.
Maybe a little more than 60, but
it really makes me wonder, where the hell were the other 30%? The fuck is wrong with you? I mean, were you just thinking that your vote doesn't really matter? I mean, are you that naive?
Well,
I mean, prove me wrong. Vote and then tell me, your vote didn't matter.
I will concede the point that in, I think, 3/4 of the states, it's so overwhelmingly red or blue that it's really hard to convince yourself that your vote matters. I mean, I was in Massachusetts. Hillary's going to win there by more than... I think just in California... Hillary won by more than the population of like the entire Middle America, but and if you're in North Dakota,
which
West Virginia, Trump is winning by 70-something%. It's hard to feel like your vote makes a difference either way either. It's only in Florida, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and then even with like House districts like quote local elections, it's so gerrymandered that like most people's votes don't count.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, I will concede. All right.
But that's just because two-party's stupid. Like, two-party is a stupid...
I don't see a way out of the two-party system. As much as I don't like it, I don't see a way out of it. It's too big.
Well, in America it might be. I mean, I've lived and voted in other countries. Well, I voted in Israel and I saw elections in Colombia and France. And
you know what there should be?
There are other systems.
There should be a blockchain system for politics.
Yeah. How do you mean?
Because then everything is just done by... I was going to say popular vote, but we want to avoid that too.
Process. I'm realizing that this is kind of a point of my commonality with like Jordan Peterson a little less, but a bunch of these kind of people who are questioning things. Jonathan Haidt is like, I'm more interested in making the process healthy than in the outcomes. Huh. And that goes back to the equal opportunity thing. The process of how you work things out. If you believe in that process, then even if the outcome is against what you wanted, you'll defend it.
Sure.
Because it's like, hey,
yeah,
fair and square.
Right.
That guy beat me in the sports game, and he's going to go on to the next round. But man, I don't like him, but He was awesome, and he beat me. And I don't know if that's a good analogy, but like.
No, I mean, I'd be happy with that system too. I mean, it's part of the reason, the whole thing about voter fraud and gerrymandering, these are voter suppression and stuff. These are huge problems in a democracy,
Yeah.
in American democracy, in modern American democracy. How do we solve it? I mean, I got a lot of great ideas, but I'm falling short on this one. I just suggested blockchain, but that's gonna eliminate anyone who doesn't have internet or the means to the technology to engage in this technology.
Well, this comes back to what. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like big crises help focus people on their priorities, help people sort out their priorities. Like, by a lot of measures, World War II is the best thing that ever happened to America.
Yeah.
Because, when it started, we were gonna lose. And we were losing. We got our asses whooped by the Japanese for 6 months. And we got all of our shipping completely wrecked by the German U-boats. They were sitting right here off of the entire coast. They were just hanging out. That's why we built the Intracoastal Waterway, but it took a couple of years. But the Merchant Marine, the Coast Guard, lost more per capita people died than any other branch of the American armed services. So, like, for the first part of World War II, our troops weren't as good, our weapons weren't as good. We didn't have bases. We were thousands of miles away from where the Germans and the Japanese were just totally whooping everyone. And the first time we faced them in battle in North Africa, we tried to land all the way. I think it was late 42. We landed in Morocco, Casablanca. And then the first time we fought the Germans was trying to head over into Libya. Got our asses whooped. And it was we're not as good as these guys. We don't know what we're doing. We don't have as good weapons. We don't have as good generals. We don't know what we're doing. We don't have as good soldiers. It took a while for us to... And that made the entire country be oh, snap. And we just totally changed so many things. The entire Ford Motor Company, they just went in and said, "You're not making cars anymore. You're making airplanes." And within 6 months or 8 months, they were just making tons of awesome airplanes.
Wow.
Just overnight. These days...
Ford made airplanes?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, during World War II. In less time, these days it would take that much time to just have a committee meet.
Right.
To discuss a possible, performance review.
Now, what allowed it then that doesn't allow it now?
I mean, fear, I guess. The fear that we were going to lose. Sense of national crisis.
Okay, but in a time of peace, so to speak, we would say, no, that's tyrannical that the government forces a private organization to sell them something other than what they want to produce.
Totally. I mean, World War II in America, and World War I, but I think World War II even more so, people say that it was actually kind of it was a benign totalitarianism. It was totalitarian.
That's what I was wondering.
Everybody got drafted, or at least you had to show up for the draft board and get tested. Selective service. It was oh, okay, you have a back problem or your vision isn't good enough, but you had to show up. If you don't show up, you were a fugitive.
Wow.
And you'd be tracked down, and food got rationed, and it was a totalitarian country. It doesn't mean that it was. Totalitarian just means it's a system. The system covered everything. All the land got looked at. Oh, what are we going to use for this? What are we going to use for this? Oh, we're going to use it for the army? Oh, sorry, you're leaving. Eminent domain.
Wow.
You lose your property. We'll compensate you or whatever. But no, they went totalitarian. For sure. England also... the Soviet Union already was totalitarian, so they didn't... they actually became less totalitarian because they were oh, we need people actually to, innovate and try and,
So we need the flexibility to actually be totalitarian.
I don't know if we need to be totalitarian. I know what you're saying. We need to change a lot of things. I don't know that we need to be. I think we need the ability to hold huge companies accountable and stop their level of just. I've heard that 70 companies are producing 90 something percent of all the greenhouse gas in the world.
Wow.
So we don't necessarily have to go totalitarian at everything. We just have to say to Exxon and to Dow and to these huge companies, you no longer get to just do whatever you want. It doesn't mean we're gonna totalitarian control every small business, but I think that if we don't look at the really big businesses that are buying all the legislators and
Again, that's a classical liberal stance, right?
well, it's a challenge. I don't know if it fits with liberal ideology. What do you mean?
Well, the classical liberal, if I understand it correctly, says what's in the best interest of the country. So the country can then dictate regulations and force private companies to adhere to what's in the best interest of the country, the larger team. This is not libertarianism where every man for himself, may the strongest survive. No, we're a team and we're working together. So as a team, the government is going to make the best call for the country at the expense of individual liberty.
Well, there's corporate liberty and there's individual liberty. Like, the way you're describing it almost sounds like China today, where most people, most of the time, are pretty free. Meaning, like, you could be starting businesses and doing 100 things, but periodically they just intervene and they're like, this is not good for the country, so we're going to seize a whole bunch of people's assets and companies. But they don't have the Bill of Rights. They don't have any due process to really fall back on. It's still a communist
Right.
ruled country.
Right.
Like, they have laws. It's not a free-for-all.
Right.
But, like, they now have this social score. It's like Black Mirror. Did you hear about this?
I know the name Black Mirror. What?
Black Mirror is this crazy TV show. Oh my god, you would love it. It's really dark and twisted. It's like tweaks on, like, near future dystopia.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of awesome.
Cool.
But so in China now, you have this, like, social integrity score. I don't know what they call it.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of this, yes.
So it's like if you mess up little things and it sort of adds up on your score, you no longer can buy a plane ticket.
Right.
And they control the internet, so, like, you can't actually browse outside of China. Like, you can't, like, get onto Google
Right.
when you're in China.
Yeah. And I heard a jaywalker gets their photo put up on Times Square or the equivalent,
Yeah, that's messed up. I mean, I agree with you that there needs to be some sort. I mean, America does intervene regularly in big company activity.
Oh, yeah, I mean, to a point.
But they don't do it, like, with a vision or a purpose. They do it kind of in a backwards ass way.
Well, the gears of democracy work slow.
Yeah.
You know, it's not totalitarian. Totalitarian, the one thing totalitarian governments have for them is they can move on a dime.
Yeah.
You know, which is why, the commander-in-chief is allowed to, invoke executive order to do, what we'd normally think of as crazy things.
Yeah.
Extreme times call for extreme measures,
Mm-hmm.
So, that is good. I mean, I can't see a way around that, because if constantly we had to hold a referendum on whether or not we should send troops here or there, we're never going to agree 100%, and we need someone making the decisions. We just got to hope that those people in power who are making those decisions are the ones we want making the decisions.
Well, I still question the idea of people being in power. Like, the Iroquois actually used to all make a decision together about going to war. I don't know how they did it. I mean, I know they had a system.
Yeah, but they didn't do it for very long.
They did. I mean, 400 years is longer than America. They had, like, a working consensus system that everyone had to agree.
Yeah, I'd have to know more about that because I don't know how that would work.
It was pretty cool. We based part of our system on theirs. They had like a Senate type system and then like a representative type system. But it wasn't by majority vote. It was always by consensus, but like at the local level.
Huh.
Like each village or each clan or whatever was like, this is our rep.
Huh.
But we trust them. But if it's a really big decision, they'll come back to us and check.
Huh.
But if they decided to go to war, it was like everyone together was like, yeah, it looks like a war might need to happen. And then they would temporarily appoint a group of war chiefs. And the war chiefs were only men, but they could be removed by the only women group.
Really?
Yeah, they were like, okay, the men run the war, but the women can just be like, war chiefs are getting out of line, you're fired.
That's mint.
And then when the war was over, they were like, okay, we're done with war, there's no more war chiefs, war council. You just go back to like ordinary life. I'm totally simplifying. It was a much more like awesome, complicated thing. But they did not have,
though.
they didn't have like, oh, everybody voted and now one guy's in charge. And they didn't have a king. And so like up in 1787 or whenever we had the Constitutional Convention, there was like Iroquois hanging out. And all the like founding fathers had been like in French and Indian wars. And they like knew some of them. They negotiated treaties with them. And they were like, how do you guys not have a... I mean, it's not really credited in history officially, but we know they were there.
Huh.
And we know that we'd been negotiating with them for the entire time we'd been colonies. You know, or not we, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Americans.
Huh.
So, it can be done, and they had... You know, it wasn't as big as America. Nothing's really ever been as big as America, except for like a couple other empires, but it was bigger than like... a lot of European countries. It was like, I don't know, maybe 100,000 people and the size of like New York, Vermont, Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
Ohio, or, you know, a lot of that was the Iroquois Confederacy. It was pretty huge. So people are always like, well, there's no other way to do it except to have this thing. And I'm like, well, there's lots of other ways to do it. You can have a king. You can have a consensus non-led.
Well, I mean, practically speaking, we can't just up and up change. One, the current reigning power, aristocracy, won't let it happen.
Yeah.
And two, if you can't get people out to vote on their local elections to begin with now, that system sure as hell wouldn't work very well.
But that to me is just a question of feeling like it makes any difference at all. Like, almost everybody in America uses like an ATM. And ATMs are so effective. Like, when's the last time you worried that the ATM was going to give you the right amount of money?
Right.
It wasn't going to steal from you, and it wasn't going to take too little. Like, I mean, I think it was 15 years ago is the last time I remember ATM was like malfunctioning and giving people too much. If you made like a $10 withdrawal, it would give you $20 bills because they
really?
moved the slots. It was like way back in the 90s. And, you know, it didn't work very well because, like, the next day the bank was like, okay, everybody who made a $20 withdrawal from this one ATM, you idiots, we have records of it.
Right.
You know, you have to give the money back. So it was like, we have the ability to have this system that almost all Americans use almost every day, and we totally trust it. We could do that with voting if we wanted to. We could do that with voting every day if we wanted to. If we felt like it made a difference.
But no, I don't think we could easily. Because with the banks, you have bank numbers. So now you're talking about giving people national ID numbers. The closest thing we have is a social security number. But we're so freaking scared of that. When I say we, I'm really talking about libertarians. And, you know, oh, you can't do that. And also, you know, there's a faction of people who complain about, you know, the very poor minority in the middle of a rural area that can't get to a DMV to get an identity card because they have no car and no transportation. And you know what, Grandma, you ain't voting. You know, I think we have to make some concessions here. I want most people to vote. I want all people to vote, really.
I guess where I'm hung up on is like, why?
Yeah,
Why voting? As opposed to like genuine participation in decision making. Like, how many decisions?
Voting is genuine participation.
I'm not sure it is. I want to question this whole idea of like democracy being like you vote once every few years for someone who allegedly serves your interest.
Yeah, but you do vote every year for local politics and stuff like that.
Okay, but even that, like, what are you voting for? You're voting for this tiny subset of people who've made their way through party politics to become one of the candidates. Like, in the party politics, that's not in the Constitution. There's no parties in the Constitution. Like, this doesn't
So
work.
are you looking for more direct like referendums? Screw the people. You know what?
That's closer. That's closer. Yeah.
This is what I think. First of all, this is coming from someone who works in IT all the time, and every device on a network has a number.
Yeah.
To me, that's just the base system.
Has an identifier. Unique
Exactly.
identifier.
So, people in a system need a number.
Yep.
I'm sorry, we know who you are.
Yep.
That's all it is. You know, if you want to go out and live in the woods, you know what? We'll let you do that. But guess what? You're not entitled to fucking anything then. In fact, every red light you go to, you got to pay into that because you're not paying taxes. So if you're on our roads, now you have to pay. I don't know. Of course, it's
you're
impractical.
exaggerating to make a point. Yeah, I understand.
So let's assume everyone has a number and they can be accounted for. Now we can have at least a library or something, and you can do these referendums. Okay, we want to put a new stoplight at this intersection. Who is in favor? Everyone go to this board and cast your vote. It's secure. We know we can document
I
it.
would love it if we had some input into how big our traffic fees were. Like, I got a
I just saw that.
a speeding ticket for the first time in 10 years or more, I don't remember. And it's just for one parking ticket. It's $295 for the ticket and another $300 like driver education fee or something.
What kind of ticket was it?
$590, one speeding ticket
Speeding ticket.
on Northern State Parkway. One ticket. That's like a month's rent. That's like a lot of money. What is it? A disincentive after the fact? I mean, I should have fought it because I think if you fight it, you can at least get it reduced.
No, you definitely 100% get it reduced.
But I don't live here, so I didn't
Yeah.
know I would be here, and I didn't want to have to be, at some court date. Because that's half my day of whatever day that is, and maybe even a second court appearance. Like, I was like, this just isn't worth it. I'm just going to plead guilty and get it over with. And then I was like, well, that was a bad decision.
It is, yeah. I mean, I usually take a vacation day. I will fucking waste their time.
Yeah.
I will waste their time as much as I can because at this point you're already getting the money from me. I'm already paying taxes. It's
Right.
my fucking taxes.
But it's such a it's not it's counterproductive system because
it is very
that's
counterproductive.
hours of your time that you could be working. It's hours of their time that they could be doing like things with people who did something real.
And just to keep it in perspective, this is Brookhaven. Brookhaven is known as Crookhaven. It's a
corrupt system.
It's really bad. It's really
But
bad.
I don't think it's even that bad compared to, I don't know, Ferguson, Missouri or whatever, where like the entire town budget was made of like making fees on poor people.
Well, it depends. I mean, give us enough time.
Yeah,
Wait.
give us time. I mean, but I agree with you that like so how do we even vote to like make that not the way, like it doesn't seem like our votes have any control over these systems. Like they decided to put a new stop sign in your neighborhood. Did you get a say? Like, oh,
But
they
if
claimed they had some hearing, but like you didn't have a chance to go to that. And like,
It's true. It's true. But I mean, we're all too busy with our lives. I mean, lives are extremely complex now.
But if there was a way to do it like online, which could easily be set up, you could be involved.
I don't think it's easy.
I think it's easy. I mean,
I'll say this. I think if there's a way, blockchain is the way to do it because you need to be able to verify everything.
Sure, double verification would be, what is it, a double ledger? Whatever that core sort of feature is of blockchain accounting. 100%. That makes it better, easier. But that's just a backing technology. That's just making it secure. I don't care what method you make it secure.
I know what you're saying, but websites have been hacked. I mean, I get the elections have been hacked because the Russians knew how to fucking get into our fucking voting booths.
Yeah, they
That's
didn't
ridiculous.
change much. I mean, maybe they helped Trump win, but no, just kidding. I think they wanted to. It doesn't seem like they actually made all that much difference. But look, I agree with you that but it's not that hard to have like fail safes. It's not that hard to have like in person after the fact verification. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I voted for this, and then afterwards you're like, yes, I did. I certified that was my vote. Like if it didn't come out right or something, if it got hacked. It wouldn't be that hard to
I think it would be a massive undertaking. I think it'd be a huge expense, and I'm not saying it wouldn't be worth it, but it would be an investment, and everyone would have to be on the same page.
Well, the way I see it,
the problem is the people in charge would rather not change anything.
You might be right. I'm not sure the people in charge don't want to change anything. They just want to change contradictory things or whatever. Like, if we don't change it, we're going to have a collapse. We're already seeing a massive decline in people's belief that the system is working.
Yes.
That we're being told the truth. That the vote... like, I no longer believe... When they tell me Republicans won the election in Florida, I'm like, oh, again? Yeah, did you? You sure you got more people? You sure if I went back and checked with every single person who tried to vote in Florida in 2018 or 2016 or 2000, more people tried to vote for Republicans than Democrats? I actually don't believe that anymore.
Yeah.
I no longer believe that. So I don't trust it, and I'm a pretty high level of faith in the system kind of person compared to a lot of people we know who are just like, screw it, the whole system is totally rotten. If they don't fix it and make it more participatory, very soon we're going to see... I mean, I think the Trump phenomenon is one direction of people saying, smash it, what do I care?
Exactly, yeah, no, that's I think that's what it is.
And that's worse than the effort of fixing it, is to let it get more and more broken in this direction. It's going to get more and more broken. Like, I've been saying this. If, in 2020, okay, there's going to be an election. If. Let's assume we even hold the election.
Oh, God.
Right? Okay, let's assume for a second that it's close. Okay?
Right.
But the polls are telling us, again, that it's a 2 or 3% total popular vote lead, according to exit polls, for the Democrat. That's how much Hillary won by, right? It was like 3 percentage points or something, right? But they are telling us that the Democrats have won the Electoral College.
Okay.
That they win, I don't know, Pennsylvania and Georgia and Florida. Is Trump going to say, I accept defeat? I don't believe that he will. If it's even within 1,000 miles of close, I think he's going to claim voter fraud and he's going to say, I'm still president. If he's still alive.
I don't think he's...
if he's still whatever.
I don't think he's going to still claim president, but I think he's going to go away crying. But do you think he's even going... Do you think... I don't think he's going to even run again.
What do you mean?
I don't think he's going to run again.
He's going to retire?
Retire. I think he's going to be like, I did my part, I passed the torch.
I don't know. He's already talking about winning again. He's already making noise that all the voting is
It depends how things go. If the going gets rough, he's going to fucking bail like...
Oh, that would be wonderful. But I'm saying if he doesn't bail, he's not going to admit defeat.
I see what you're saying.
That is not happening. I think even if Democrats sweep all the swing states, he'll claim it's fraud. He'll claim it's something. I
mean, this is why it is important, though, is to, I really try to drive home the fact to all my Facebook friends how much he lies, just blatantly lies. He's claimed without evidence, without even suspicion, just because it fits his agenda and narrative, that there's been voter fraud. What are you talking about?
Well, I heard an interesting distinction, and I think this is true because it's true about even people who knew him beforehand when he was just a Democrat, schmo, professional wrestler, promoter,
Yeah.
They're like, he doesn't really lie. He's a bullshitter. He's just constantly bullshitting.
Yeah.
You never expect anything that comes out of his mouth to be anything but bullshit. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's just not even on that spectrum.
Yep.
And I think that's true, and I think that's also why a lot of his followers haven't gotten fed up with him. They're like, of course he's bullshitting.
Yep.
It's how he feels. Like, it doesn't make... It's like every left-wing thing that, oh, this is how I feel. What I feel is true. And,
Oh, Kellyanne Conway said straight up in the fucking first week, you can't listen to what he says. You have to. Wait, what you said? You can't listen to what he says. You have to understand what he means.
Right, right. It's like, but that's like a perfect distillation of it. Like it's also that, and this was always my worry about identity politics. It was like the left started playing more and more and more identity politics and saying who you are matters than what you say and what you believe and what your positions are. Oh, it matters that you're black and trans and from a minority and this and that. And it's like, I don't care what color you are. I care whether what you say has merit. And I thought that was the official politically correct position from 20 years ago.
Uh-huh.
It used to be we were striving to be colorblind.
You're showing your age.
I know. We're from a different generation already. But the sort of poetic beauty of what the Republican Party did was like, oh yeah, you want to play identity politics? We'll one up you because we have the biggest identity. We have white people. We're going to play identity politics and we're going to win. And we're going to win again. And we're going to win so much we're going to get sick of winning. And they did, and it was like, oh, well, shit. They're right. Like, that's identity politics. Like, I don't want identity politics anywhere. I don't want to care.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
I don't want to care, like, where you're from and what.
You know, I think one of the worst things Apple did, Apple Computer that is, it wasn't even this iOS, it was the previous iOS, is when they colorized all the emoji.
Oh,
so it wasn't just the yellow thumbs up. You could have a white thumbs up, or a brown thumbs up, or a black thumbs up, and all the shades.
That pissed me off.
That pissed me off too, because now it was forced. They still had the yellow one, which was good. So I wasn't forced to decide
the yellow
what I
is
had
like,
to choose.
It's the color of the Simpsons.
Yeah.
It's not racist.
It was anonymous.
It was non-human.
That's the brilliance of the internet, I thought, is that it could be you don't know who you're talking to.
Right.
That's what I wanted. Now all of a sudden I've got my white friends, thinking they're funny, showing me the black thumbs up. I have my minority friends who think they're completely serious and authentic, showing me the brown thumbs up.
Right, and I'm texting with my friend who's African, like not even African American, but African, and I'm like, what color thumb do I use? And I'm like, why should I have to think this? Like, I'm not saying from a privilege. I don't know which color will offend him less. He wasn't offended. He didn't care. But, like, the point was, like, why did you put color into a completely abstract symbol?
It definitely says something about society, and there's a good segment of society that really cares about it.
But it's the wrong... This comes back to what we were saying. It's the wrong venue for that caring to be expressed. That you should have the option of green, purple, or yellow thumbs.
I mean, what Apple did, I guess, was they split the line.
Yeah.
Because they gave from white to black and also allowed me to keep my yellow.
Yeah.
So that's what I do all the time. I'm yellow, man. I'm fucking... But now, does that mean I'm Asian?
Oh, I know, right?
And I didn't even think that was derogatory. I mean, it was like, okay, you got yellow people, you got black people, you got white people.
You got red people.
Red people.
Indians used to be red.
Yeah, I mean, just as a matter of, generalizing, not to pass judgment, not one's better than the other.
Actually, this comes back. I've been saying that we should eliminate the category of color. Like, whiteness was created when blackness was created. Like, there didn't really used to be a category of white people until they created racist slavery. You know what I mean? Like, there was just people. In Europe,
yeah,
there was just people. Like, there was...
I mean, that must have had been a long time ago.
1600s. Like, up until, like, I was reading about the Ottoman Empire recently. Like, the Ottomans were, like, conquering half of Europe. And, like, over 1 million Europeans got captured and either made slaves or just brought into the Muslim world and landed in Casablanca or Cairo or wherever. And, the Ottomans ruled from Istanbul all the way up to Hungary and Romania and Croatia. They were held back at Venice, was like their frontier.
Okay.
And Vienna.
Okay.
Was the frontier. Everything else was ruled by the Muslims. And all the way up into the Ukraine also. The whole southern Ukraine and Crimea was part of the Ottoman Empire. It was all Muslim.
But you say Venice, so Italy was taken too?
Parts of Italy, yeah.
Really?
Parts of what's today Italy were at one point part of the Ottoman Empire.
Huh.
I think at different points they even ruled like maybe they might have taken over Sicily. I'm not sure. But for sure, Sicily had plenty of Africans.
I'd be surprised if they didn't.
Yeah, they didn't. Why
Sicily's
didn't they?
right
It's
there.
right there. And they for sure ruled Greece for
Huh.
most of that time, till the 1820s, I think. So, Africans and Middle Eastern and Turks, who basically, like, Turks go all the way to, like, Mongolia. Like, there's Asian, Muslim, Middle Eastern,
Wow.
Indian, African,
Okay.
was all kind of like a mess. Like, even like parts of Ireland had like pirate ports that were like part African and stuff. Going back like hundreds and hundreds of years. Color, like, I'm sure people had prejudice, but it wasn't like defined by one word or direction. You know, it was like everyone's everyone and everyone's fighting each other, and there's lots of people who were pirates and empires and slaves and privateers, and they all were messing with each other. And when you look at like how it played out in the Americas, then you find all these new people who are like, what's an Indian? There's really no one Indian. There's lots of different people. But like, okay, there's Indians, and then they're bringing over Africans, and they're bringing over different kinds of white indentured slaves and stuff, white. But they didn't have the terms yet. It was just one big clusterfuck.
Yeah.
It's not that these were moral people. It's not that these weren't racist people. But it wasn't like, I'm white, you're black. That wasn't a thing. It was like, you're Catholic, I'm Protestant.
Yeah.
I'm going to kill you. Like, that's what was like the biggest narrative going on, you know? And then, or you're Spanish and I'm English and you're Portuguese and you're... And they were just all fighting each other, but it wasn't like color was one thing. And when you look at it today, and this is something that drives me nuts, like, I'm a basketball fan. There are a huge range of colors on that court. You know? But somehow anyone with one drop of African American blood we call black. But I'm like, he's whiter than that white guy from Serbia. But he has curly hair. Okay, so he's an African American, so he's black. I'm like, are you telling us our eyes are lying? Like, this guy is black, this guy is middle, something.
As much... I mean, I just want to hear your response to this, and...
But just admit that color is not the actual color in our eyes. It's this social category. That's really what I'm saying.
So speak on behalf of Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren.
Is she Indian?
Oh, I don't know. Probably. Part of her ancestors from Oklahoma. Everybody in Oklahoma was probably intermixed with the American Indians. DNA tests don't tell you what's not been mapped to...
I mean, I think it comes out that she is 32nd or 64th,
Yeah.
you know. I just bring it up because... Yeah, I mean,
it's funny to me that story, the bigger story was, she'll get tested if Trump donates $1 million to some charity, and he didn't donate it. That should be the story, is he's a liar.
yeah.
And he said he would give the money, and he didn't, because he never pays anyone that he says he owes. Not never, but he has a pretty bad rep. That should have been the main story. Most Americans have some degree of, most
Well,
white
the thing
and
is,
black
I
Americans.
mean, what the right doesn't like, I believe she went to school on a scholarship based on the fact that she claimed she was American Indian.
Yeah.
I mean...
So what? I don't care.
I mean, you're right. I mean, neither do I. I mean... And as it turns out, she is 64th or even 128th. Who gives a shit? I mean, you're part...
Look, if your grandmother told you that she was part Indian, what are you going to say? Your grandmother's a lie? You're not going to believe your grandmother? I don't know. My grandfather always said that we're part Tatar. Tartar?
What's that?
Mongol. The Mongols conquered all of Russia and Eastern Europe up to Hungary.
They didn't do all of Russia.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah. They ruled it for like 100, 200 years or something. The Tartar horde.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. The last Tartar king, Mongol king, was still ruling like a kingdom in the Caucasus until 1920.
Oh my god.
They had kings for 700 years that were descended from Genghis Khan. They're badass. But my grandfather always said we had some some part of us is Mongol. You know, I don't know. I don't.
Yeah.
You know, there's no reason for me to doubt it because I know part of my family is from like Ukraine, which was ruled by the Tartars.
Yeah.
And you go back 700 years when they conquered. I mean, how could we not? You know, we're all related if you go back far enough.
Sure, exactly, yeah.
So it's like, why wouldn't it be true? I'm not going to bet the president $1 million that I'm part Mongol. But my grandfather told me, so I have no reason to doubt it. You know what I mean? But I don't know how DNA... you know, you randomly inherit half of your DNA from each of your parents, right? So even if 1/4 of your family is totally Neapolitan, let's just say, one of your grandfathers, it might be that you have almost none of the official markers that we've noticed as Neapolitan, and all that's showing up in your DNA is Sicilian. Because all of the things we mapped on the DNA, we don't know exactly what's what. We have a few identifiers that we're sure of.
I see.
You know, you're almost all Italian, right?
Almost all Sicilian.
Sicilian, as far as you know.
As far as I know, yeah.
Oh, maybe you're part African, like True Romance?
I mean, yeah, true. But I mean, actually, the Italian side is almost all Sicilian, but I do have German. My grandmother was German.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Here.
What do you mean here?
Like your Sicilian great-grandparents came over here.
3 of my grandparents were Sicilian.
Were born there.
Born
in Italy.
Were they born there? No, I don't think they were. I don't know. I should know more, but it doesn't matter. No, I don't know.
But wait, so okay, we went on a tangent because you asked about Elizabeth Warren, but what do you think of my idea that the idea of whiteness is just as racist as the idea of blackness?
Oh, definitely. I mean, absolutely. You know, what's funny is, you know, we just passed Thanksgiving, and so online everyone's like, oh, it should be freaking Indigenous Peoples Day, and I'm like, you know, it burns my britches a little bit because, and I'm probably just wrong in celebrating the fact that, you know, America was, quote, discovered with Christopher Columbus. You know, it's like...
On Columbus Day.
On Columbus Day, yeah. Instead of
and
Columbus Day...
And your Italian-American heritage, whatever.
Yeah, and so it's like, fuck you, we're taking that away from you, and we're going to make it Indigenous Peoples Day. But you know what? Fine. And then there was...
You're meaning like you could give it up? What do you care?
I'll accept it. Yeah. I'll accept it. You know, I feel like it's...
It's not worth dying on that hill.
It's definitely not worth dying on that hill. You know, whatever, Exactly. But then, Indigenous Peoples Day was also offensive because you're not recognizing the exact tribe Indians are, right? You're just lumping them into a group as if they're just one. And I was like, oh my God, you can't ever please everybody.
Right.
And then I heard in a very next post, you know, someone talking about white people. I'm like, fuck you. Group me into everyone. I want to be called, you know, white Sicilian German from Setauket.
Right.
You know, or whatever. You know, you can't just group me all into other white people because that's discriminatory or you know, it's offensive. Where do you draw the line? I thought, really, I was doing the right thing by calling it Indigenous Peoples Day, and then I hear that's being offensive to American Indians because I didn't say, okay, it's National Cherokee, Iroquois, you know, and all the other...
You're right, because it's a huge can of worms to even say Indigenous people. I mean, not to minimize for a second, you know, just how awful America has treated all the different nations.
It goes without saying.
It goes without saying. But we'll say it, because we will make the point of saying it.
Yep.
You know, we broke every treaty, we dispossessed them, we killed them. We, the people before us.
Right. America.
The previous settlements, the English settlers,
yeah.
the French settlers, and then America, once it became a country, and we came in the, you know, our ancestors came, not that we are responsible for the actions of our ancestors, but in the 1880s, 90s, to, you know, 1900. Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. Are we responsible? Do we benefit from? I don't know, whatever. But the point is, wait, what was my point?
Lumping them all into one group?
Yeah. Okay. So. Oh damn! I had a different point. They are. Oh, the term indigenous. That's what was bothering me.
Right.
It is such a loaded term.
Why?
What does that mean, indigenous? Like,
I took it to mean that you are. I see what you're getting at.
you were here first? Yes, you were. Okay, and I was there before. My ancestors were in Israel before. The Arabs took it over. So am I indigenous to there? Like where do you? Because
Right.
but
right,
but if
right,
I
right,
believe
right,
my
right.
whole nation's tribal story, we conquered it from the Canaanites.
Right, right.
Everyone, when you talk about a type of beetle, you say, oh, it's indigenous to, Cuba or to Plum Island or to like some little location that animal or insect it's indigenous to. We say it's like organically part of that thing. But all of this is dynamic. All of this is changing. What does it mean you were there first?
Right.
It's that it comes out like a moral judgment. You're saying indigenous like, oh, you're better than because you were there first. And that's a really dangerous sort of logic.
Right.
When you look at it, even
right,
American
right.
Indian tribes, they got pushed west and west and west. And like a lot of the places that they became like hugely defined and powerful and successful, they displaced other indigenous groups.
Yeah.
They fought each other. A lot of the times they cooperated and whatever. But the point is like, who's from where? These identities, once you go down the road of saying the identity matters more than the morals and the values, you wind up in the same territory that the fascists and the ultra nationalists are treading in. That your identity matters more than.
Oh shit.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you say that logic is true for any indigenous people, African people, whatever, you're saying that logic is true, and so then white people are like, no. We're going to do the white people version of it, and that's really ugly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to open up the Pandora's box of that logic.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Huh. I was never a fan of identity politics.
I really think it's a mistake. I think, you and I, like you said, we're dating ourselves. We're old enough to remember the first iPhones, and,
Well, I mean, we're old enough to remember there being no cell phones.
Yeah.
We're old enough to remember there being no beepers.
Yeah.
So, we're definitely dating ourselves. I just, as times have changed that we realize now, think of just another 20 years and how fast technology changes and how quickly we will be far removed. I mean, my parents are still, they got a computer, they got an iPhone, they got an iPad, they're still using all this technology. But, I remember my great-grandmother, she didn't want to use the remote control because it was just, it's easier for me just to get up and change a channel. When is that going to happen to me? And at what point, what is it going to be,
Already you and
it's
I
inevitable.
we don't use Twitter.
No. Someone has just asked me if I'm on Snapchat. I'm like, no, I'm not on Snapchat.
Yeah.
No.
Yep. I mean, things can happen. Things can change fast, and this is. I don't know whether to be hopeful or not, or pessimistic. But like, like I studied like Jared Diamond and whatnot. Like, it could be that we're at the edge of like, maybe it's not a collapse, but like just massive change.
Oh, I've said this for a while. I think, I'll introduce the topic again, the Great Filter. Are you familiar with the Great Filter? The cosmic event of the Great Filter is, let me start with the statistical probability that we're the only ones in the entire universe is extremely small.
Oh, Fermi paradox.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. So, I'll just play out the scenario. The fact that, statistically speaking, it can't be the case that we're the only ones here. There's got to be someone else out there. Why haven't we found them
There's got to be life somewhere else. There's got to be intelligent life somewhere else. There's got to be advanced beings somewhere else. Why aren't, of those advanced beings, why aren't some of them using radio technology? Or
why haven't they contacted us?
Why haven't they contacted us?
Why
aren't they exploring?
Yes, exactly. So, the answer is, or the proposition is that because we have not move beyond the Great Filter. And the Great Filter is the complete decimation of our entire species for any number of reasons. It could be an asteroid hits the planet. It could be thermonuclear war. It could be complete hunger and starvation. There are so many different reasons why the human race could cease to exist.
Right. It could be that no other species has gotten to our level of intelligence, but also had our level of self-destructive stupidity.
Yeah.
It could be that other intelligent species, like, we talk about finding other intelligent species, but we have, like, dolphins and killer whales are pretty freaking smart, and they might be close to as smart as we are. But we, and dolphins have a language and stuff. And it's like, there might be other things in the ocean, I don't know, octopuses and stuff that have huge brains.
Yeah.
And it's like, we just don't respect them for various reasons. But, like, we could say, oh, we found other intelligent life. But they're evolved in such a way they have no desire for tools or technology. They're happy to talk and make poetry and make beautiful whale songs to each other. And they're evolved that they can just eat their baleen or their the krill and they eat the little fish, and they don't need to do what we chose to do.
I think we have been very, very fortunate in that an asteroid hasn't come and just swallowed the Earth. We've been very fortunate that this environment has been very kind to us.
Yeah.
We have not been very fortunate in intelligence, because it seems like we are killing our own environment.
Yeah.
We're going to be the ones of our own mass destruction, whether it be global warming, thermonuclear war, doing something to the food chain that fucks it all up and we all wind up starving.
Yeah, the insect apocalypse.
But I do think that Great Filter is upon us.
Yeah.
And I think it's within the next 200 years. I don't know if we'll see it in our lifetime, but I think the way technology progresses and things just seem to get worse quicker, exponentially, our actions now are going to make even a bigger difference 50 years from now.
Yeah, I could see it being even within the next 10 or 20 years. Like,
so if we don't...
It feels like we're at a tipping point.
Yeah, I do think we're sort of at that tipping
point.
World
population has doubled in our lifetimes. That's nuts.
Yeah, that is absolutely nuts.
It is a big planet, but there's now, whatever it is, 7.5 billion people, and there was only 3.7, I think, when we were born, or 3.8 or something. And it's like, that changes everything.
We need that Star Trek moment.
Yeah.
In Star Trek, it was light speed. Once they developed light speed, they realized, oh my god, they're not the only ones in their universe, and, within 50 years there's world peace. That's great. That's what we need. We need
actually, in Star Trek, I think it's a Vulcan. I think they discovered Vulcan, or Vulcan discovered humans.
That maybe I think the way they discovered him though was through light speed.
Through light speed.
Yeah. So I mean, light speed would be monumental. We're still trying to figure out how to work within and among ourselves, let alone a completely different planet, and to organize. I mean, all of a sudden, the planet. I mean, people are so afraid of globalism. Why? That's a single team. Shouldn't we be advocating for globalism? Let's all be on the same team?
In some form or another, yeah.
But it makes no sense unless there's another planet. Now all of a sudden, great, now it's Earth against Jupiter because we found there's Jupiterians, or whatever you call them. Why do we have to wait until there's an other before we realize that we are a we,
Well, yeah, and it scares me in a way, though, because our attitude of us being a we has manifest in just destroying anything we think is an other.
Yeah.
Whether the other was American Indians or lions or pests or vermin or anything that threatened our control of our civilization, of our nature, of
we're
our
so
everything.
Resource hungry. I mean, to the points that, even that's exactly what Wall Street's all about. It's controlling resources. And that's what defines success, is how much resources do you have. Money means nothing if you don't own the resources or can get it.
Yeah.
Politics means nothing if you don't control resources. So until someone threatens Earth's resources from another planet, we're not ever going to unite. I'll never understand why we don't. I mean, I personally, I think NATO. I think the IMF. I think
For the UN itself.
the UN. Exactly. These are steps in the right direction. They're Interpol.
Or they should be. They should be steps in the right direction. I mean, functionally, it's a question of like, okay, so you created a tool, a structure that could reach everywhere in the world. But is that structure being used to do good, or is it being used to destroy, all the things that are good about the diversity of the world? Right now, I would say the preponderance of use of these international things is to like destroy indigenous cultures around the world and expand capital and cut down rainforests and create mines in the middle of the Congo where we get the pieces for our cell phones.
It's the double-edged sword. I mean, definitely, because the powers that be that created this, they're not going to relinquish. They're not going to want to relinquish any power. It's only going to be to expand power. Yeah, I mean, look at the example even in Central America. America, in the past 100 years, not so much recently, but previously, we had a lot to do with their politics. And even if it was to destabilize them, that was in our best interest. It wasn't to make them stronger.
Right.
Why, we're capitalism. Why do we want competition from our neighbors?
Yep.
Let's fucking destabilize them, make sure that they're never a competition, and instead, let's take our resources and invest in the other part of the world that has oil, because we know that the rest of the world wants oil. What the fuck does, Central America have for us?
All right, let's try to get a last note that's like positive here, though, because we're starting to fall. And I was afraid of doing this. I was afraid of falling into the pessimism. Both of us are getting into our protective like stances of like, what is power for? Like, can we get to a point where people feel safe enough? Because in a way, like, part of what we've done over the last century is make the world safer and safer and safer. We've got vaccines for most diseases. We've got, the truth is, I could take a plane to another plane, to a bus, to a taxi, to almost anywhere on Earth within, a couple days at most, and be pretty safe almost the entire time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even going into the Amazon or going into the ocean near the Philippines where there's supposedly still pirates but I've been to those places. It's fine. You're mostly fine. Like, the world is unbelievably safe by comparison. You know what I mean? I could even choose to get attached to an NGO and go to a war zone like Yemen or Syria and the world is the safest it's ever been, and the world is safe for rich people. Like, they go wherever they want, and they have super services and hotels and fancy Airbnbs. At what point do those people who are hoarding all the power and resources, they decide because we see this with some of the most prominent ones Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and that Patagonia guy, who are just you know what, I made enough money, I'm going to give the rest of it to save the world. But, or to stop AIDS or to educate children or whatever they're going to give 49 of their $50 billion to. At what point do they change their pattern before retiring? And they're just you know what, I don't need to control anymore. I have enough. The world is better if everyone is partying. The world is better if everyone is surviving. You know what I mean? It is in the hands of only a few thousand people, let's say, who are the super richest people. If all the billionaires decided to do something, for better or worse, there's not much the rest of us could do about it. So if all those billionaires decided to move in the direction of hey, let's just do universal basic income, they could do that. Right?
I just don't think it would be in their best interest. Because by it's been ingrained to us is to hoard resources. Why would you give it away? To give someone else the chance to maybe compete with you on a realistic level.
Well, they do give. There is competitive donations. You see that dynamic happening already, in like Hollywood, and they donate to like causes. They'll be like, oh, that guy's giving $1 million, I'll give $1 million. They do that, but it doesn't dominate their economic activity. I agree with you, except for like Warren Buffett now is giving away most of his fortune, I think. I'm just saying it could be. You're right that it does not seem to be the way they're socialized to think.
I'm just thinking the long-term solution is, because I do think that in this, the state that we're in, it's not the last state we're going to be in.
Right.
This is just a passing stone that we're trying to skip across the pond. So what is the next skip we're going to make? I mean, and this is, my compassionate side, my liberal side, always says, look, there are problems in society. There's homelessness. There are people that are sick psychologically. I mean, you look at most of the homeless, they're not well. Yeah. Okay? They have a very difficult time negotiating life in general. Do you just say, fuck them because they can't fend for themselves? There's a dog-eat-dog world out there, and I'm a Darwinist, I'm a capitalist, and, if they can't survive, well, just kill them off. Well, you're really coming really close to Hitler's view of humanity.
Yeah.
That's not the world I want to live in.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to give people something they don't deserve if you don't want to, one, kill them yourself, or two, let them die a horrible, miserable, long existence slowly themselves. So what's the middle ground?
You're right. I mean, this comes back to the aristocracy thing, I think. The idea that because of the way the finance world has evolved and our government has evolved and technology has changed, like 100 years ago, let's say, most people in the world, on the planet, were subsistence farmers or still living hunter-gatherers in a few places in the Amazon, or like were poor industrial workers, but like were working, making things. Right? And there was a few people who were like...
I think Marcuse brought this point up. Marcuse said that the worst thing to happen to humanity was... Oh, was it Marcuse? It may have even been...
Rawls.
No, it doesn't sound familiar. It doesn't really matter. I know I was reading Marcuse recently, but he was talking about the factory line. The assembly line. Back in the day, you were a clockmaker. And you could make one clock a day. Yeah. And you started from nothing, and at the end of the day, you made one complete clock, and you were satisfied because you had a finished product.
You were an artist.
Ta-da!
Yeah.
But then the factory line came, and now you were responsible for one gear or one arm or something. But you have 10 people, and now you can make 10 clocks.
Yep.
Or, let's say you have 5
clocks.
people, you can make 10 clocks. Obviously, it's got to be more efficient.
Right.
But it's great in terms of capitalism because now your outcome is more product with less labor. But there's something you're missing. There's a reason why you're gaining more on this end. So what are you losing? Because conservation of energy happens all over. You're missing something. What you're missing is the satisfaction that each person gains. Because you know what? At the end of the day, you can say, yes, I am responsible for putting in 100 gears and 100 clocks. But you can't say that you made a single fucking clock.
Yeah, and it gave you a sense of purpose and accomplishment.
Exactly.
And agency.
Exactly. And that's what we're missing today. How many people have meaningless jobs? If you didn't show up for tomorrow, does it make a fucking difference? So what the hell are you really being paid for? What does anything really matter? And we wonder why people are getting addicted to opioids? We wonder why people don't want to go out and vote? No, it all makes completely sense, really. In that context, we're all living lives that are so far removed from what the basic, fundamental...
Agency, purpose.
Yeah. Engage. I mean, it used to be... I mean, I can now understand why there's religion. I am the biggest atheist you'll find. I don't believe that there's a God. But you know what? Just because I don't believe in God doesn't mean I don't believe in religion. Religion gives people purpose.
Yep.
Fine. Go at it. If that's what gets you up in the morning, you're an autonomous person with free will. Fucking make a difference. Go do something. And unless you really find that purpose for yourself, man, you're really...
Well, so this is the Star Trek moment. This is what you're talking about. Like, we are at the point now where most people's jobs don't make any real difference. 5% of the world or 2% of the world or something produces all of our food and medicine and all of our necessary, like things we actually need to live. And, you know, people who produce, like, you know, our housing and whatever, like, it's really not. We could have enough with the efforts of 5% of the planet.
Yep.
And the rest of us, it's almost just like a totally arbitrary arrangement.
Yeah.
That we have enough food. And right now we're doing that by saying, oh, you have a job. It's a meaningless job. We pay you either a little if you're a low-level clerk at a warehouse for Amazon, or we pay you a lot if you're a corporate lawyer threatening our other corporate lawyers so that you all make a stalemate and your companies can do a big deal, but you get paid $500 an hour to do something utterly meaningless and just totally sucking.
Right.
But either one of them is useless jobs.
Right.
Right? But really, we could have Star Trek, where everybody has plenty. Everybody has abundance. We could just choose to arrange things that way. You'd still need to address what you just brought up. But that'd be different. That'd be easy. It's like, okay, everybody has enough. But now, like, you do a local shift.
You're right.
You do a local shift helping your doctor's office or helping your child care or helping, like the Amish, like raise each other's barns. And you have a sense of meaning. And you learn and philosophize together and you teach each other the things you're interested in. And you'd have meaning. You don't need to have bullshit jobs. Like, we could arrange things differently.
Yeah. I mean, I really don't know how practical possible it is, but...
It seems more practical and possible than the current path towards increasing rich people and chaos.
It's a parallel. It's exactly what addiction is.
Okay. What do you mean addiction?
We're addicted to this lifestyle. We're addicted to being numb, desensitized. I mean, you know, the average attention span is, I think, less than 30 seconds. If you're on Facebook and something doesn't grip you, you're going to click right past it. That's how fast. We're suffering in a quite sick way of, what's the word? In philosophy, it's nihilism. Nihilism. That's it. We're suffering from nihilism. Nothing matters. And you think of the greatest things that do matter, it's the next fashion trend. It's the next car that's coming out. It's the next new iPhone. And this is what's feeding society. And these are the great motivators of what we're encouraging young people to go into. Work for Apple. Work for Amazon. Come out with that new iPhone. Because that's what matters.
Right, like we stalled out. We were on the path to Star Trek. Like in 1966, Star Trek came out, right? 1969, we went to the moon. We kept doing manned missions to the moon until 73. Here we are in 2018. We still haven't made it to Mars. Like, I think yesterday was they put that, like, live feed from the rover. But, like, we still haven't gone to Mars. Like, we thought all the books, the science fiction books that were written in the 50s, 60s, it was like it assumed in the 70s we'd make it to Mars. In the or we'd colonize the moon. We'd 80s, 90s.
Correct me if I'm wrong. But the human species has only been to the moon once.
No, we had, I think there were, I just was in the Smithsonian in D.C. There was a bunch of manned missions to the moon. There was a bunch.
They were?
Yeah. More than Apollo 13 was Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin.
But we've been there since.
I
remember in 2006, we fucking crash landed a unit on the south pole of the moon, and we thought it was a big thing.
We stopped going in 73. we went from 69 to 73. Before we were born. But, they have them in the Smithsonian, like these different missions. Um,
I want to check on that because I don't think just for the basic theory alone of those weird ass conspiracy theorists who say we never been to the moon.
we went a bunch, but I don't know how many times.
I think we've only been once.
List of missions to the moon. Between 68 and 72, manned missions to the moon were conducted as part of the Apollo program. Apollo 8 went into orbit around the moon, followed by Apollo 10. Apollo 6 missions landed men on the moon.
Huh.
Apollo 11 was Neil Armstrong. And
11 was Neil Armstrong?
11. Apollo 11 was July 1969. All 9 manned missions returned safely to the Earth. Apollo 13 was intended to land, but they had that flyby screw up because of that. The movie happened, and therefore they had the screw up. Missions to the moon have been conducted also by the Soviet Union, U.S., Japan, India, and China, but not landings.
So how many total?
6.
6.
6 lands.
I mean, that's pretty intense.
Yeah. Luna 2. Wow, there's a lot here. Apollo 8. Launch failure. Lots of launch failures. Apollo 11. Successful. Zond 7 was successful. Oh, that was Russian. They flew around it, but they didn't land. Apollo 12, they landed. Luna 16, Zond 8. Zond, I never heard of this.
Yeah,
These Russian things. It's kind of badass.
So say Zond 8. Technology demonstration for planned manned missions returned to Earth successfully, but they didn't land on the moon.
Didn't land on the moon.
Oh, it's a flyby.
Yeah, the only ones that landed were the Apollo from 11, 14, 15.
No, Apollo 11. Apollo 11 landed.
Apollo 11 landed. Apollo 12
Manned orbital lander.
landed. Apollo 14 landed. Apollo 13 didn't land. Apollo 15 landed. PFS-1. Luna. Apollo 16 landed.
What year was that? Apollo 16?
72. Apollo 17 landed. Luna 21 landed a lander rover, but I don't think they sent a person. Mariner 10.
Huh.
And that's it. No more manned landings.
I mean, it could be just because there was no need.
Well, I don't know about need. There was never need. I don't know what a need means.
I mean, a scientific curiosity. We got the samples we needed,
for that,
or curiosity
for
satisfied.
that stage, and we still send, I think, these lander type exploratory missions unmanned because it's a lot easier.
Well, to sum up, I think it is somewhat a cosmic joke that the very questions that Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle set to seek are still the very same answers we seek today. And it is
Looking for meaning
in this life, what makes us happy. So long as you can find that, and it's not difficult. It takes an effort. It's not impossible. But you can find meaning. You won't live forever.
Well, I'm struggling with the micro and macro. Like on a personal level, yes, sure. But on a macro level, like if you were like part of this amazing American Indian group that had like really meaningful, beautiful lives and had figured out half of psychotherapy because they had all their dream interpretation and stuff, and then the Spanish show up and everybody dies of disease. It's like, well, that was the end of that.
But I don't think that's a failure.
Well, it's not. You're right. It's not necessarily a failure, but where we are now, we're looking at the equivalent of the Spanish showing up, because either we're fossil fuels or pollution or something, or like we're looking at the potential that we can't keep growing our population like exponentially and having the environment like still subsist, to be there to be subsistence for us, to support us, if we don't change something. Like we need our Star Trek moment so that people can be freed to have like meaningful lives.
I'm scared that Star Trek moment will happen before humanity as a whole, which I think is a pipe dream. I don't think this will ever happen, but you just got to discover meaning for yourself. Some people will essentially just be too sick to get it.
Yeah.
They will have to be cared for. But on the one end of the spectrum, we have those uber capitalists who will fucking strive to constantly be the upper echelon and squash all competition because that is what is within their Darwinian mode of operandi. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you got the hippies, the artists who, just be free and I'm going to love the earth and love my life and, they're making no difference whatsoever.
Except that they're living meaningful lives.
Except they're living meaningful lives to them, yeah. I mean, unless you reconcile that on a whole freaking global level, that's a monumental task. I don't see that happening. I think this was the purpose of every prophet.
Right. I mean, I think there can be little shifts that lead to big things. Like, you get an idea out there, and it does, like in the 18 or 17, whatever, anti-slavery, like, wasn't a thing. Like, it wasn't even a thought. Like, it just was accepted the way we accept it. Today, we're just like, yeah, there needs to be war sometimes. There's just war. We're against a given war, but we don't imagine that we could just abolish all war, right?
No,
It'd be nice if it wasn't
I think there are some people who definitely think war is completely unnecessary.
You know what I'm saying, though? Like, most people just accept that there is war, even though they think it's an ugly thing. Like, they accept that, oh, okay, it'd be nice if we didn't have war at all, but if there's a Nazis, we need to fight them. Or there's an ISIS, I guess we need to fight them. Because they're fighting us, and, like, we'll fight a war.
Okay.
That's how people used to think about slavery. It was like, it sucks, but it's just there. It sometimes happens, and we won't be a part of it, but there's nothing we can do about it. And then somebody put out the idea, no, we could just abolish it. And then, like, by 100 years later, all around the world, they start abolishing slavery. It was like this amazing thing. The idea took hold.
Right.
And you see that with things like feminism, too. Not that it's been that successful, but it's been pretty successful compared to 100 years ago or 200 years ago. Whatever it was. 100 years ago, women got the vote, I think, in 1919 in America, and around then in different countries.
Right.
And now, I don't say women are equal, but it's way better than it was. And, you put the right idea out there, and it just could be that within 20 years, everyone will be like, well, yeah, that was pretty obvious. Why don't we do that? I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying it always happens, and we can look back and say, like, well, why didn't they do that before then? But they didn't. It just didn't take hold.
Well, if I'm putting an optimistic spin on anything, it's that we need nothing but more education all around. Education's the key. Learn history, learn math, learn philosophy. The essentials,
The tools you need to be functional. To make decisions.
Yeah. Yep. And never stop learning. Once you think you know it all and no one has anything to teach you, you might as well die. Seriously.
Yeah, that's a Bob Dylan line. He who is not busy...
Really?
Well, he says, he who is not busy being born is busy dying. And actually, that was a line that I liked. They were arguing with Jordan Peterson on the Aspen interview, I think, where he said, like, it's incredibly stupid that we've decided that education is a thing for 18 to 22-year-olds. Like, why is it for them and not for people older or younger? Like,
yeah,
that kind of wide-ranging education and discussion and whatever should be for every age. You should always be learning.
Yep, definitely.
On that note, Left In Podcast. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. That was awesome.